Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. I handed my cheating wife the DNA results at her celebration dinner. She had no idea what was coming. That morning, I stood alone in our bedroom as the first light of dawn slipped through the curtains. In my hands was Ivy's silk scarf, soft, delicate, the kind of thing she'd wear to some fancy hospital gala or a night out with her doctor friends. But in that moment, it felt like a blade twisting in my gut. The smell hit me first. A sharp, musky cologne clung to the fabric one I didn't wear. It lingered like an unwelcome guest. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it was nothing, maybe a coworker with terrible taste in aftershave she'd hugged at work. But then I saw it. A bright red lipstick stain, smeared along the edge. A shade she never wore. My stomach dropped. I just stood there, staring, my thoughts racing while my body stayed frozen. 13 years of marriage, and it all began to unravel not with a blowout argument, but with a quiet, sickening moment I couldn't erase. I'd been ignoring the signs for months. Ivy's late nights at the hospital had become routine. Her excuses? Long shifts, extra paperwork. I never pushed her. I trusted her. She was a pediatrician, after all, dedicated to saving children. And me? I stayed busy too, crunching numbers as a financial consultant, keeping our life in Ridgewood Heights comfortable. We had a good setup, the big house with a wraparound porch, Caleb and Aria laughing in the backyard, a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. But that scarf changed everything. I dropped it on the dresser, then spotted my shirt, the one she wore the night before after spilling wine on her dress, draped over the chair. I picked it up, and there it was, another lipstick mark on the collar. Same red. My chest tightened. This wasn't an accident. She wasn't just cheating, she was leaving evidence, like she wanted me to catch her. I don't know how long I stood there holding that shirt, my mind spinning. The kids were still asleep down the hall. Caleb, 11, probably dreaming of baseball. Aria, 8, curled up with the stuffed bunny she never let go of. The house was silent, but inside my head, it was chaos. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Another doctor? A patient's father? I kept picturing her laughing with someone else, touching his arm, while I stayed home cooking dinner for the kids. My throat burned. I wanted to scream, to shake her awake and demand the truth. But I didn't. I gently laid the shirt back down, smoothed it like nothing was wrong, and went downstairs to make coffee. That's when it truly hit me. Ivy hadn't just broken my trust. She had shattered everything we built. And worse, she wasn't hiding it anymore. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Ivy came downstairs smiling, her hair damp from the shower. "Morning, Alec," she said casually, grabbing her coffee mug like it was any other day. I muttered something back, my eyes drawn to her neck, wondering if that cologne still lingered on her skin. She didn't notice or didn't care. She kissed the kids goodbye, grabbed her bag, and headed off to work. I stood at the kitchen window, watching her car back out of the driveway, my hands gripping the edge of the sink. 13 years, 2 kids, and a life I believed was ours now slipping through my fingers. I didn't know exactly what to do next, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her play me for a fool anymore. That scarf, that lipstick, they weren't just signs. They were the beginning of something I couldn't ignore. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about Ivy, about our family, about myself. The rest of the day felt like a fog. I tried to work, but I was barely present. Normally, diving into my clients' portfolios brought me comfort. Numbers were clean, predictable, something I could control. But not today. Every time I blinked, I saw that red lipstick. I could still smell the cologne. By the time I picked up Caleb and Aria from school, I was unraveling. Still, I kept it together. "How was your day, bud?" I asked Caleb, ruffling his hair. He shrugged and mumbled something about a math test. Aria, full of energy, talked nonstop about a new friend she'd made. Her voice was bright and unbothered. I smiled, nodded, pretended everything was normal. But inside, I was falling apart. How do you tell your children that their mother might not be who you thought she was? You don't. Not yet. So I held it in. Made spaghetti for dinner. Helped with homework. Ivy texted to say she'd be late, another emergency at the hospital. I didn't respond. Once the kids were asleep, I returned to the bedroom, picked up the scarf, and sat on the edge of the bed. My marriage was dying. I didn't know if I could save it, or if I even wanted to. What I did know was that Ivy had started something, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table. The kids were already at school. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the fridge. Ivy had left early again, like she always did lately. I sat there with my coffee, staring at the chair where she'd sat just hours earlier, smiling, pretending everything was fine. To everyone else, we were perfect. Alec and Ivy Warner, the golden couple of Ridgewood Heights. Friends would tell us how lucky we were, how much they envied our life. At parties, Ivy would lean into me, laughing at one of my dumb jokes, her hand resting gently on mine like it belonged there. I'd grin back, proud to be her husband, proud of the life we'd built. Caleb and Arya were the heart of it. Caleb, with his quiet, thoughtful way. Arya, a whirlwind of joy. People looked at us and thought, that's what love looks like. But that morning, with the memory of the scarf burning in my mind, I saw the truth. It had all been a lie. The love I thought we had was already gone, and I had been too blind to see it. Looking back, the signs were there scattered across the last few years like breadcrumbs I should have followed. It started small. She began staying late at the hospital, blaming a heavier workload. I believed her, even brought her dinner some nights. She'd kiss me quickly, say thanks. But her eyes never truly met mine. I figured it was just stress. Being a pediatrician isn't easy. Sick kids, anxious parents, long hours. I didn't want to add to her burden by complaining. But then the distance started creeping in. Our bed felt bigger, emptier. When I reached for her, she'd roll away, murmuring that she was tired. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, convincing myself it was just a phase. We'd had rough patches before, tight finances when I was starting my business, the sleepless nights after Arya was born. And every time, we made it through. So I believed we'd make it through this too. I was wrong. It wasn't just the late nights or the growing silence between us. It was the accumulation of small, sharp moments I kept brushing off. The way she began correcting me in front of others, subtle jabs disguised as humor. At a barbecue last summer, I was telling a story about a client when she cut in. That's not how it happened, Alec. You always exaggerate. Everyone laughed. But it hit me hard. She'd never done that before, not like that. Or how she'd gently pull her hand away when I tried to hold it at hospital events, dismissing it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Meanwhile, I'd stand there, publicly singing her praises. I couldn't do what I do without Ivy. She'd smile, say something sweet in return, but it felt rehearsed, like we were reading from a script we'd both memorized too well. I kept thinking it was my fault, that I wasn't enough, that I needed to try harder. So I did. I planned date nights she'd cancel. I brought home flowers she'd forget they were there. I was chasing a ghost. The kids didn't say anything, or maybe they sensed it, and I just didn't want to see it. Caleb had gotten quieter, retreating into his room with his video games. Arya still hugged us both, but her questions stung. Why is mommy always gone? I'd smile and lie. She's helping sick kids, sweetie. She'd nod, believing me. I wanted to believe it too. But the truth was, Ivy had checked out of our marriage long before that scarf appeared. The late nights weren't all about work. The emotional distance wasn't just fatigue. She was pulling away, brick by brick, building a wall I didn't see until it was too high to climb. And I was too busy trying to be the good husband to notice. Maybe it started 2 years ago, when we went through IVF for Arya. Back then, she held my hand, cried with me when we got the good news. Now I wonder if even that was real. I took a sip of coffee, cold now, and looked out the window. The backyard, the swing set Caleb and I built last spring, gently swaying in the breeze. A reminder of better days. I thought about the hospital fundraiser last month. Ivy had been radiant, working the room with ease. I stood by the bar, chatting with her colleagues. They patted me on the back, said how lucky I was. I smiled, agreed, playing my part. But replaying it now, I could see it differently. The way she kept checking her phone, slipping away to take a call, returning with that tight, distant smile. I'd asked who it was. She'd said, just work. I didn't push. I never pushed. And that was my mistake. The perfect life we built wasn't perfect at all. It was just a stage. And while I stuck to the script, she'd already begun rewriting it. The question now wasn't how we fell apart, it was what she was hiding, and why she'd let me find that scarf. I stood in the kitchen that morning, a week before our 13th anniversary. The house was still quiet, the kids asleep upstairs. Ivy was in the shower, the faint sound of running water echoing through the pipes. I tried to stay busy wiping down the counter, setting out cereal bowls, anything to keep my thoughts from spiraling. But they wouldn't stop. The scarf, the lipstick, that cologne. They'd been gnawing at the edges of my mind for days, keeping me awake at night, churning through every quiet moment. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, that there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe I'd confront her soon, maybe even plan something nice for our anniversary to help reset things between us. I reached for her phone on the counter, not to snoop, just to check our shared calendar. I wanted to see if we could plan a weekend away, just the two of us. Try to fix whatever was cracking between us. But the moment I unlocked the screen, everything changed. His name was right there, Dr. Miles Harris. A text notification glowing like a warning flare. And my stomach dropped like I'd been hit in the gut. Miles. I knew him. Tall. Polished. One of those smooth-talking doctors from the hospital. I'd shaken his hand at events, Made small talk about golf and the weather while he smiled that practiced, charming smile. The message was short, but brutal. Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again. When are you telling him? My hand started to shake. The phone slipped slightly in my grip. I didn't even think, just started scrolling, my thumb moving faster than my brain. And then it all spilled out. Months of messages. Plans for secret meetups. Meet me at the lake house. 8 o'clock tonight. Inside jokes. Lies. He'd lose it if he knew. Poor guy still thinks we're just going through a rough patch. Then Miles replied, "At least he makes a good babysitter while you're with me." I felt sick. The room seemed to close in around me. I stood there, staring at the screen, heart pounding in my ears, every word cutting deeper than the last. This wasn't just an affair. Ivy wasn't just cheating, she was mocking me, laughing about me behind my back, turning me into a punchline. Poor guy? That's what she called me. Me, the man who stayed up with her during med school exams, who held her hand through 2 childbirths, who built this life alongside her. And now I was a joke. My grip tightened around the phone. For a moment, I wanted to throw it, watch it shatter like everything else had. But I didn't. I heard the shower stop, the creak of the floorboards as she moved around upstairs. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been and turned to the coffee maker. My hands were steady now, but inside, I was falling apart. She came downstairs a few minutes later, wrapped in her robe, hair damp, shoulders glistening. "Morning," she said, reaching for her mug like it was just another day. I nodded, muttered, "Morning," and handed her the coffee. She smiled, a small, polite smile, the kind you give a stranger. I watched her carefully, searching her face for something, remorse, guilt, anything. But there was nothing. She looked calm, normal, like she hadn't spent months lying to me. I wanted to scream, "Who the hell is Miles? What have you been doing?" But I didn't. I just stood there, sipping my coffee, letting the silence stretch between us. She kissed me goodbye, light and distant, barely touching me, and walked out the door. I waited until her car was gone, then went into the bathroom, locked the door, and punched the mirror. The glass shattered, blood seeped from my knuckles, but I didn't feel a thing. All I felt was rage. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I dropped the kids off at school, went into the office, and stared blankly at my computer screen. The numbers meant nothing: client portfolios, market projections, all blurred together. The only thing I saw was that message. "When are you telling him?" She was planning to leave me. And Miles, he knew. He was part of it. I kept seeing his face, shaking my hand at hospital events, grinning like we were friends. Had he been laughing at me the whole time? And Ivy, how long had she been sneaking off to him? The lake house. She said it was a work retreat. Just last month. I'd stayed home with Caleb and Arya, taken them to the park, made pancakes. Meanwhile, she was with him. My chest burned, a mix of fury and humiliation. I trusted her while they made a fool of me. When I got home, the kids were at the table doing homework. I cooked dinner on autopilot: chicken and rice, their favorite. Ivy texted saying she'd be late again. Hospital stuff. I didn't respond. After the kids were asleep, I sat alone in the dark living room, letting it all sink in. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was finished. Done with me. With us. And she'd been dragging me along until she was ready to cut the cord. That text proved everything. Months of lies. Of her slipping away while I tried to hold it all together. And now I realized those clues. The scarf, the lipstick, the cologne. They weren't accidents. She left them for me to find. Maybe she was testing me. Maybe daring me to react, hoping I'd explode so she could walk away without guilt. But I wasn't giving her that. Not yet. I'd play along. Stay quiet. Plan my next move. Because if Ivy thought she could break me and stroll away clean, she was wrong. Dead wrong. That night, after the house settled into that heavy, late-hour stillness, I waited. Caleb's light was off. Arya clutched her stuffed bunny, breathing softly. I checked on them both, kissed their foreheads, told them I loved them. I'd done it 1,000 times. But this time felt different, like I was holding tighter because everything else was slipping away. Downstairs, Ivy sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. The blue light flickered over her face. I'd carried those messages all day, the betrayal, the mockery, and my knuckles still ached from the shattered mirror. A dull pain that matched the one in my chest. I couldn't keep pretending. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, walked into the living room, and stood in front of her. It was time. "Are you sleeping with Miles?" I asked, my voice low, steady. No yelling. No theatrics. Just the truth. She didn't flinch. She set her phone down slow, deliberate, and looked me in the eyes. "Yes," she said flat, emotionless, like she was telling me she'd picked up milk from the store. No hesitation. No apology. Just that one word, sharp and final, hanging in the air between us. My throat tightened. My hands curled into fists at my sides. But I didn't move. Her face stayed blank, almost bored, like the collapse of everything we'd built meant nothing to her. I'd spent 13 years in this house with her late-night whispers about our future, mornings filled with plans and laughter. Now, she sat there like I was a stranger, like none of it mattered. "I want a divorce, Alec," she said, leaning back into the couch and folding her arms across her chest. That was it. No tears. No argument. Just a cold, final sentence like she was reading from a script. I didn't answer at first. I just looked at her trying to find any trace of the woman I'd married in those hard, vacant eyes. The Ivy who laughed with me over burnt dinners. Who sobbed into my shoulder the night her father died. But she was gone. Replaced by someone who had planned this, had probably rehearsed it with Miles while I played the part of the loyal, clueless husband. I wanted to ask why. To scream. To beg. But I didn't. Because the way she said it so calm, so certain told me everything. This wasn't some impulse. It was calculated. I was just the last loose end to tie up. So I nodded slowly and said, "Okay." Her eyebrows lifted just slightly, like she was surprised I didn't break down. But I turned and walked upstairs without another word. I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. The next morning, I woke to the sound of her moving around in the kitchen. I stayed in bed for a minute, staring at the ceiling while the weight of what happened settled over me. My marriage was over. Just like that, with a single word and a shrug. I got up, dressed, and headed downstairs. Ivy was pouring coffee, acting like it was any other morning. On the counter beside her mug was a business card, her lawyer's name printed in sharp, black ink. She didn't say a word about it, just sipped her coffee and glanced at me. "I'll be at the hospital late again," she said. Then she grabbed her bag and walked out. I picked up the card, ran my thumb along the edge, and felt something shift inside me. Cold resolve. She thought that was it. That I'd quietly sign the papers, let her run off with Miles, and disappear from the picture. She was wrong. I dropped the kids at school, drove to the office, and sat down at my desk, the card still in my pocket. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The shock was gone, replaced by something harder, sharper. She'd played me, but I wasn't going to crumble. I'd helped build this life, our home, our family, my career. I wasn't just some footnote she could cross out. I thought of Caleb and Arya, how peaceful they looked as they slept last night. They didn't ask for this. They didn't deserve to be caught in the fallout. And Miles smirking, texting her behind my back while I tucked our kids into bed. He didn't get to win either. I pulled out my phone, searched his name, and found his bio on the hospital website. Dr. Miles Harris, pediatric surgeon, polished and perfect. I hated him, but I hated her more for letting him in. By lunchtime, I'd made a decision. This wasn't just about losing a wife, I was stepping into a battle. Ivy thought she had it all figured out. Drop a bombshell, walk away clean. But that business card she left on the counter? That wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Something wasn't adding up. The scarf. The lipstick. The cologne. She hadn't been careful, she'd practically laid it all out for me to find. Like she wanted this confrontation, like she was baiting me into it. And now that I was in it, I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I was going to dig. I was going to fight. And I was going to make damn sure she regretted underestimating me. Because the real betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was what she thought she could get away with next. That afternoon, I sat across from Derek Reyes in his office, the city skyline stretching behind him through a wall of glass. He was sharp, one of the best divorce attorneys in town, known for navigating messy cases and winning. I called him right after dropping the kids at school. Ivy's lawyer's card was still in my pocket, burning like a warning I couldn't ignore. My hands were steady now. My head was finally clear. Derek listened without interrupting as I laid it all out. The scarf, the lipstick, the texts, her cold yes, the divorce bombshell. He took notes, nodding now and then, but never breaking eye contact. When I finished, he set his pen down and said, "Start digging, Alec. If she's this bold, there's more she's not telling you." His words hit hard, and they felt true. That evening, once the kids were in bed, I got to work. I pulled out our financial records, joint accounts, checking, savings, investments. I'd managed it all for years. Ivy trusted me with the money while she focused on her career. I never questioned anything. I was too busy keeping everything else together: bills, vacations, baseball games, dance recitals. I grabbed my laptop, a stack of bank statements, and a beer. Then I sat down at the kitchen table. The house was dark, the fridge humming quietly behind me. At first, it all looked normal. Mortgage payments, groceries, Caleb's baseball fees, Arya's dance lessons. Then I saw it. A $5,000 withdrawal, 6 months ago, to something called Horizon Holdings. I frowned. Flipped to the next month. Another $7,000. Then $10,000 after that. My heart started racing. I opened the online account and scrolled back 2 years. And there it was, over and over. Withdrawal after withdrawal. All to Horizon Holdings. Almost $200,000 gone. And I'd missed it. How? I'd been too focused on holding everything else together. Keeping our family afloat. I hadn't seen her siphoning money right under my nose. I searched Horizon Holdings on my phone. Nothing clear, just a vague business listing, No real information. And then it hit me. The dates lined up. Every large withdrawal matched a specific time 2 years ago when we went through IVF for Arya. That whole period had been a blur of appointments, stress, and Ivy's late nights at the clinic. Now, I wasn't so sure they were all at the clinic. She'd said it was work those late nights, the weekend shifts, but now I wasn't so sure. What was she really doing with all that money? The next morning, I called the bank. My voice stayed calm, though inside I was anything but. The representative confirmed it. Horizon Holdings was a private account registered under Ivy's name alone. Something she'd set up without me. Quiet. Hidden. I thanked them, hung up, and just sat there at my desk. The kids' laughter floated in from the backyard carefree, innocent while I sat frozen, fists clenched, trying to process what I'd just learned. She'd been hiding this, building a secret fund while I carried the weight of our lives, the house, the cars, the bills, our kids' future. Was it for Miles? A getaway plan? My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. The affair was bad enough, but this was something deeper. Something she'd been working on for years. The scarf, the lipstick, they weren't careless. She'd left them on purpose, like she wanted me to unravel it all. I spent the rest of the day digging. Every bank statement I could find. The pattern became clear. The withdrawals were small, calculated. 5,000 here, 10 there, just under the radar. Easy to miss unless you were looking. But I was looking now. I called Derek and told him everything I'd found. Good, he said. Keep going. Money like that doesn't disappear. It's connected to something. We'll use it. His tone was solid. Grounded, like this was familiar territory for him. It steadied me. I hung up and went back to the paperwork, anger tightening in my chest with every new discovery. Ivy hadn't just betrayed me with another man, she was building something behind my back, planning for a future that didn't include me. I thought about Arya, about those exhausting months of IVF. All the hope, the heartbreak, the appointments. Ivy had held my hand through every one. Had that been a lie too? Was the money somehow tied to that? By nightfall, I had a pile of printouts on the coffee table, a pounding headache, and a fire in my gut. The kids were asleep. Ivy was still at the hospital, or at least that's what she said. For all I knew, she could have been anywhere. I stared at the statements. Horizon Holdings. 2 years. $200,000. Something wasn't right. Not just the affair. This was something bigger. A plan I hadn't been part of. One I'd been too trusting to question. I wanted to confront her, to throw the papers down and demand the truth. But I didn't. Derek was right. I needed more. I needed the full picture. Because if Ivy thought she could take our money, tear apart our life, and walk away unscathed, she was dead wrong. I wasn't just fighting for a divorce anymore. I was fighting for everything she tried to bury. That's how I ended up sitting in my car outside a rundown diner on the edge of town, the neon sign above the door flickering in the fading light. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, heart pounding in my chest. Derek had set this up. Said I needed to meet Dr. Preston Grayson, a man who used to work with Ivy at Ridgewood Medical Center. He'd left suddenly, under what he called mysterious circumstances. Ever since I discovered the money tied to Horizon Holdings, I'd had this gnawing feeling that Ivy's betrayal went far beyond just Miles. The $200,000. The timing. The IVF. It was all connected. Grayson had reached out to Derek after hearing about my divorce. Said he had information I'd want to hear. So I waited in the gravel parking lot, stomach twisting, watching the door. Whatever he had to say, I knew it was going to change everything. He walked in first, wiry, mid-50s, graying hair, tired eyes. I followed a minute later and slid into the booth across from him. The diner smelled like old grease and burnt coffee, the kind of place no one paid attention to two strangers talking in the corner. He didn't waste time. I've been waiting for this day, he said, voice low, leaning in. I frowned. What do you mean? He took a sip of water, then locked eyes with me. Your wife's a liar, Alec. What she did to you, it's worse than you think. My chest tightened. I'd come expecting something about the money, maybe a lead on Horizon Holdings, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. Tell me, I said, keeping my voice even, though every part of me wanted to grab him and demand answers. He leaned back, glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then began. 2 years ago, during the IVF process for Arya, Ivy made a deal. Horizon Holdings is a shell company tied to a fertility clinic she was working with off the books. She didn't just use it to hide the money. She used it to switch her sperm. I stared at him, my mind tripping over the words. Switch my what? I said, louder than I meant to. He raised a hand to calm me, then continued. She arranged for you not to be the biological father. Chose an anonymous donor instead. Paid for it all through Horizon. Kept everything off the books at Ridgewood. I found out, tried to report it, and they forced me out. My mouth went dry. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. His words hit like bricks. I thought of Arya, her big brown eyes, those wild curls, the way she'd curl up in my lap and whisper daddy. And Caleb, Always by my side, my little shadow. They weren't mine. Ivy had done this. Lied to me. Lied to them. Lied to everyone. I gripped the edge of the table. Why? I managed to ask. Preston shrugged, his expression grim. Power. Control. Maybe just because she could. She's cold, Alec. You know that now. I did. The way she'd said yes about Miles, the scarf, the lipstick, it all made sense now. She wasn't just unfaithful. She'd rewritten our family. Taken my kids from me before I ever knew. I wanted to explode, to storm out and confront her right then, but I sat there, stunned. Frozen. Preston slid a folder across the table. Emails, clinic forms, transaction records. Proof, he said. Enough to hold up in court. Use it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Ivy's signature. Payment logs. Memos. The timeline matched. 2 years ago, while I sat in waiting rooms hoping for a daughter, she was making sure I wouldn't be her father. The $200,000 wasn't just for her and Miles, it was hush money, paid to bury the truth. I looked up at Preston. Why are you telling me this now? He exhaled, long and slow. Because I've got a daughter too. And if someone did this to me, I'd want to know. I nodded, slid out of the booth, folder clutched tightly in my hand. Walked back to my car, the weight of it all pressing down on me. The drive home was a blur. My head was spinning. The kids were with a sitter. Ivy was working late again, and all I could see were their faces. Caleb's grin when he hit a home run, Aria's laugh whenever I tickled her. They weren't mine biologically, but what did that really change? I'd raised them, loved them, been their dad every single day. But Ivy had known the truth all along. She'd kept this secret while I built our life around a lie. I pulled into the garage and sat there in the dark, the engine ticking as it cooled. My hands clenched the steering wheel tighter than before. She hadn't just taken my trust or our marriage, she'd stolen my kid's truth, and I knew I'd never forgive her for that. Inside, I locked the folder away in my desk and poured myself a drink. The house was too quiet, too empty without the noise of the kids. I thought about confronting her when she came home, showing her the proof, watching her squirm, but I didn't. Not yet. Preston's words echoed in my mind. Use it. I would, but I'd do it the right way. I'd get DNA tests, build a solid case, and hit her where it hurt most. This wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud, a crime. And she would pay. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and made a promise to myself. Ivy thought she'd won, that she could rewrite our family and walk away clean. She was wrong. I'd fight for Caleb, for Aria, for me, and I'd make sure she lost everything. The next morning, a heavy weight pressed on my chest, the kind that doesn't lift no matter how deeply you breathe. Preston's words from the diner kept playing on repeat in my head. Ivy switching my sperm, Aria and Caleb not being mine biologically, Horizon Holdings hiding it all. The folder was locked away in my desk, but it felt like it was burning a hole through the whole house. I couldn't just sit on this. I needed to know for sure. I needed it in black and white. After dropping Caleb and Aria off at school, I drove across town to a drugstore where no one would recognize me. My hands shook as I grabbed 2 DNA test kits, the swab and send kind. I paid in cash, avoided the cashier's eyes, and left quickly. Back home, I sat in the kitchen staring at the kits, knowing this was the point of no return. I waited until the kids were back in the afternoon. Ivy was still at the hospital, or maybe with Miles. Who knew? I called them into the living room. Caleb flopped onto the couch, still wearing his baseball jersey. Aria bounced over, her ponytail swinging. "What's up, Dad?" Caleb asked, curious but casual. I forced a smile and held up the swabs. "Just a little science thing," I said, keeping it light. "They're doing DNA tests at school. Thought we'd try it too." Aria giggled, always eager for something new, and Caleb shrugged, game as ever. I swabbed their cheeks quickly, joking about how we'd find out if they were secretly aliens. They laughed, and for a moment, it felt normal, just me and my kids goofing around like always. But my stomach twisted in knots. I sealed the samples, added my own, and mailed them to a discreet testing center Derek had recommended. Then I waited. The next 5 days were hell. I went through the motions: work, school runs, dinners with the kids, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Ivy drifted in and out, offering her usual late-night excuses that barely registered with me. I didn't confront her, didn't even look at her longer than necessary. Maybe she didn't notice, or maybe she just didn't care. Every morning, I checked the mail, heart pounding, until finally the envelope arrived plain, unmarked, with only my name on it. I took it to my office, locked the door, and sat at my desk staring at it for a solid 10 minutes before tearing it open. The results were brutal. Probability of paternity 0% for both Caleb and Aria. I read it twice more, hoping to find some mistake. But there was none. The kids I'd raised, loved, and fought for weren't mine, not by blood. Ivy had made sure of that. I leaned back in my chair, the paper trembling in my hands. It wasn't just the fact itself, it was what she'd done. Planned, paid for with our money, all while I sat in those IVF waiting rooms, dreaming of our family. I thought about Caleb's first steps, Aria's tiny hand in mine at the park. Those moments were mine, but she'd stolen their foundation. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I was past that past shock, past hurt. What I felt now was cold, hard anger, the kind that lingers and never lets go. I grabbed my printer and made 3 copies of the results. One for Derek, one for a safety deposit box, and one for Ivy. Not yet, but when the time was right, she'd see it, and I'd watch her face. That night, I poured a whiskey and sat alone in the dark. The house was quiet, the kids were asleep, and Ivy was still out. I didn't care where she was anymore. My mind was already on what came next. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about revenge. She'd taken my trust, my money, my family's truth, and thought she could get away with it. Thought I'd sign her papers, let her run off with Miles, and disappear quietly. No way. I'd use Preston's proof, the DNA results, the money trail, and I'd hit her where it hurt hardest. I pictured her standing there smugly, dropping that lawyer's card like she'd already won. She hadn't. I'd destroy her not with yelling or begging, but with cold, calculated moves she'd never see coming. The next morning, I called Derek and told him about the results. Perfect, he said sharply. This is fraud, medical, financial. We've got her. He was already working the Angles lawsuits, criminal charges. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, on Ivy, on the life she'd built on lies. Her pristine reputation as a pediatrician, her career, her smug little world with Miles. I was going to take it all away. I hung up, pulled out Preston's folder again, and cross-checked the dates with the bank statements. It lined up perfectly. Every payment to Horizon Holdings matched the IVF timeline. She'd been so careful, but not careful enough. When Ivy got home that night, I was calm. Too calm, maybe. She walked in, tossed her bag on the counter, barely glanced at me. Kids asleep? She asked. I nodded, sipping my coffee. She said nothing else and went upstairs. I watched her go, knowing she had no idea what was coming. The DNA results were my weapon, and I'd use them when it hurt her most. This wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore, it was about making her pay. For Caleb, for Aria, for every lie she'd fed me. And I planned to savor every second of it. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie. My reflection met my gaze with hard, steady eyes. Tonight was the Ridgewood Medical Gala, the big annual event where Ivy would receive her Medical Excellence Award, a shiny plaque for her shiny life, all built on lies. She'd been buzzing about it for weeks, picking out dresses, rehearsing her speech, acting like she truly deserved every bit of praise. I played the supportive husband, nodded along, but inside I was counting down to this moment. She had no idea what I'd been up to, meeting with Derek, gathering evidence from Preston, locking away the DNA results and bank statements in a safety deposit box. Thanks to a quiet tip from Derek, the hospital board had everything now. The district attorney was circling, and lawyers for other families victims of her fertility scam were sharpening their knives. Tonight wasn't her triumph. It was her reckoning, and I would be there to watch it all come crashing down. That afternoon, I drove the kids to my sister's. Caleb grumbled about missing his game, while Aria hugged me tight and asked why I looked so serious. Just a big night, kiddo, I said, ruffling her hair. I hadn't told them their mom's world was about to collapse. They'd find out soon enough. And I'd protect them when it happened. Back home, I slipped into my best suit, the black one Ivy always said made me look sharp. She was already gone, probably at a salon, texting Miles about their celebration later. I checked my phone. Derek's last message set board's meeting now. Stay cool. I pocketed the phone, grabbed my keys, and headed to the gala. My pulse was steady, but my mind raced with what was coming. The venue was packed when I arrived, doctors, donors, hospital bigwigs mingling under glittering chandeliers, champagne glasses clinking. Across the room, I spotted Ivy, radiant in a deep blue dress, laughing with colleagues. Miles hovered nearby, his hand casually brushing her arm. I clenched my jaw but kept moving, blending into the crowd. People nodded and greeted me. Hi, Alec. Good to see you. Ivy's night, huh? I smiled tightly and politely. They didn't know I wasn't here to celebrate her. I grabbed a drink, leaned against the bar, and waited. The program began. Speeches, awards, the usual pomp. When they called her name, the room erupted in applause. She walked up with grace and confidence, and my stomach twisted with a mix of anger and satisfaction. Her speech was flawless, humble yet proud. She thanked her team, her patients, even me, with a little wave in my direction. I couldn't have done it without my family, she said, and the crowd ate it up. I raised my glass, playing along, but my eyes were fixed on the board members in the front row. They weren't clapping anymore. Dr. Ethan, the hospital chair, leaned over and whispered something to the woman next to him, his face grim. Ivy didn't notice. She was too busy basking in the spotlight. When she finished, the applause was loud, but it faded quickly. Dr. Ethan stepped to the microphone and cleared his throat. "Thank you, Dr. Warner," he said, his voice tight. "Before we proceed, we have an announcement." Ivy froze, her smile faltering as I straightened up, my heart pounding. "We've received serious allegations," Dr. Ethan announced, his voice steady but heavy. "Regarding Dr. Warner's conduct, specifically financial and medical misconduct tied to Horizon Holdings and fertility treatments. Effective immediately, she is suspended pending investigation." The room fell into a stunned silence before murmurs erupted. Ivy's face drained of color, the awards slipping from her hands. She looked around frantically, her eyes locking onto mine. I met her gaze, calm and cold, and took a slow sip of my drink. Miles stepped back, his charm wiped away, confusion clouding his features. People started whispering, "What's Horizon Holdings? Misconduct?" I saw the moment she realized this wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. She stumbled off the stage as reporters swarmed, and I stayed put, watching her unravel. I didn't move until she pushed through the crowd toward me, eyes wild. "You did this," she hissed, her voice trembling. I set my glass down and leaned in close. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly but firmly. "Enjoy your reward." Fury and fear flashed across her face before she spun around and bolted for the exit, Miles trailing behind like a lost puppy. The room buzzed with shock and questions, phones lighting up with texts, but I felt steady, almost light. I'd pictured this moment for days, planned every step with Derek, and it had gone better than I'd dared hope. Her career, her reputation, it was crumbling, and I'd been the one to light the match. I left soon after, the cool night air hitting me as I stepped outside. My phone buzzed. Derek again. "She's moving fast. She's done." I nodded to myself, got in my car, and drove home. The house was empty, the kids still at my sister's. I sat in the living room replaying it all, Ivy's smug smile fading, the board's announcement, the look on her face. It wasn't over, not yet. But tonight was mine. She'd thought she could cheat, lie, and walk away clean. I'd made sure she couldn't. As I poured a drink and settled into the silence, I let myself savor every second of her fall. The next morning, a strange calm settled over me, the kind that follows a storm you've been bracing for. The gala had been a knockout blow. Ivy's award night turned public humiliation, and I'd watched it unfold with a satisfaction I hadn't expected. She sent me a string of furious texts late that night. How could I? She'd regret this. But I didn't reply. Let her stew. Today, I had one final move to make, one I'd been saving for the perfect moment. She and Miles were celebrating at La Bella Vita, our favorite restaurant, the place where I'd proposed 13 years ago. I'd heard her on the phone yesterday, planning it before the gala fell apart, probably expecting to toast her victory. Now, it would be something entirely different, and I'd be there to deliver the final blow. I spent the day with the kids at my sister's, keeping things normal. Helped Caleb with his math homework, played dolls with Arya. They didn't know about the gala yet, and I wasn't ready to tell them. "Where's Mom?" Arya asked quietly at one point. I forced a smile. "She's busy with work, sweetie. She'll see you soon." It wasn't a lie, not really. She'd have to face them eventually. By evening, I dropped the kids off with the sitter, got dressed, dark slacks, a crisp shirt, no tie, and grabbed the envelope from my desk. Inside were the DNA results. The results were stark and undeniable. Probability of paternity 0%. I'd made an extra copy just for this moment, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. My hands were steady as I drove through the city, the lights blurring past. This was no longer about anger, it was about finishing what she'd started. I arrived at La Bella Vita about 20 minutes after they had. I called ahead, asking the hostess to text me when they sat down. The restaurant was warm and familiar, soft lighting, the clink of glasses, the scent of garlic and wine filling the air. I spotted them immediately. Ivy and Miles at a corner table, her in a red dress, him in a suit. They leaned close over half-empty wine glasses. She was talking, hands moving rapidly, probably still angry about last night. Miles looked tense, nodding along quietly. I lingered by the door for a moment, my chest tightening with the memory of proposing here, down on one knee, her laughing, the whole room applauding. Now, this was their place. I pushed the thought away, squared my shoulders, and walked over, the weight of the envelope pressing against my ribs. They noticed me as I approached. Ivy's eyes widened, then narrowed, her lips curling into that smug smirk she'd worn far too often lately. Miles shifted uneasily, his usual charm nowhere to be found. I stopped at their table, calm and composed, and nodded. "Evening," I said evenly. Ivy leaned back, crossing her arms. "What are you doing here, Alec?" She snapped, sharp and loud enough to draw a few curious glances. I didn't flinch. "Just dropping by," I said, pulling the envelope from my jacket. Congratulations on your freedom. Thought you'd want this. I slid it across the table, slow and deliberate, watching her face closely. She stared at the envelope, then back at me, her smirk faltering. Miles frowned, shifting in his seat. What's this? He asked, but Ivy didn't answer. She grabbed the envelope, ripped it open, and pulled out the paper inside. I watched her eyes scan the page, saw the moment it sank in the DNA results. Caleb, Arya, me all laid bare in cold print. Her hands trembled slightly, and the color drained from her face. That smirk vanished, replaced by something raw shock, maybe fear. Miles leaned over, confused. What is this? He asked, voice rising. She didn't look at him, just kept staring at the paper, her breath catching. I leaned in close, low enough for only them to hear. Looks like your boyfriend's the only real father at this table, I said quietly, but sharply. Funny how that works. The restaurant seemed to fall silent, or at least it felt that way, the hum of voices fading as heads turned. Ivy's eyes snapped up to mine, wide and wild, like she couldn't believe I'd actually done it. Miles grabbed the paper from her and scanned it, his face twisting in disbelief. Ivy, what the hell? He started, but she cut him off, slamming her hand on the table. You bastard, she hissed at me, her voice trembling. I straightened, met her glare with a steady one of my own. Takes one to know one, I said, then turned and walked away, feeling their eyes burn into my back. The room buzzed again with whispers and gasps, but I didn't look back. I'd said what I needed to say, dropped the bomb I'd been holding, and left her to choke on it. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp. I stood by my car, letting it all sink in. She'd opened that envelope thinking she could handle anything I threw her way, but she hadn't expected this. Not here. Not like this. Miles's confusion, her panic, it was perfect. I'd taken her smug little celebration and flipped it into a nightmare, right at the very spot where I'd once promised her forever. My phone buzzed, Derek checking in. How'd it go? I texted back, better than planned. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove home, the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting, if only just a little. Ivy had thought she controlled the narrative, but I'd taken the pen and rewritten the ending, and this one, she wouldn't forget. The morning after the restaurant scene, I woke to a stillness I hadn't felt in months, the kind of quiet that follows when you finally lay a burden down. Her career was in ruins after the gala. Her affair with Miles out in the open. And those DNA results? They'd hit like a freight train. I could still see her face pale, trembling, the mask she wore shattered completely. The kids were still asleep down the hall, and the house felt peaceful for once. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over Ridgewood Heights. 13 years of being Ivy's husband were behind me now, and today felt like the first page of something new, something I'd write on my terms. By noon, the fallout was in full swing. My phone buzzed with updates from Derek. The hospital had launched a full investigation into Ivy's fertility practices. Horizon Holdings? Shut down. Records seized. The board was scrambling, desperate to contain the damage. Families were stepping forward, some with stories like mine, others far worse, all of them pointing back to her. The district attorney had enough to press charges, fraud, embezzlement, maybe more. Derek said they'd stick. Miles was gone too. Word was, he'd left her after the restaurant packed up and disappeared. Maybe the legal fire scared him off. Maybe he just saw her for what she really was. I didn't care. He was out, and she was alone. The divorce papers I'd signed felt like a clean break, final, sharp, deserved. I'd fought hard for full custody, and with everything stacking against her, the judge didn't hesitate. Caleb and Arya were mine now legally, completely, no matter what the DNA said. I spent the day with them, keeping it simple. We went to the park. Caleb kicked a soccer ball around. Arya flew high on the swings, her laughter ringing out through the chilly air. They asked about their mom again. I kept it soft. She's dealing with some stuff, I told them. But we're okay. They nodded, believing me, trusting me, and I held on to that. One day, I'd tell them more. When they were older, when it wouldn't shatter their world. For now, they were safe, happy, and that was enough. Back home, we made pizza. Dough everywhere. Cheese on the floor. Laughter echoing through the kitchen. It was messy, real, ours, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Ivy's shadow wasn't gone, not completely, but it was fading. And in its place, I was building something new. That evening, while I was cleaning up, Derek called. The board's forming an ethics committee on medical fraud, he said. They want you on it. Your story, your fight, they think it matters. I leaned against the counter, the phone warm in my hand, and took a breath. Me, Alec Warner, the guy who'd once been just Ivy's husband, her stage prop, now being asked to help stop people like her. It wasn't the future I'd planned. My life used to be numbers, spreadsheets, not this. But somehow it fit. I'd lived it, lost to it, fought through it. Yeah, I finally said, I'm in. Derek laughed short, sharp. Good. You've earned it. We hung up, and I stood there, letting it sink in. A new role. A new purpose. Something I'd chosen, not her. Ivy showed up later that night, unannounced. The doorbell rang, and there she was, hair unkempt, eyes red, none of the polished doctor facade left. The kids were already in bed, thank God. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat. She hugged her arms around herself, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I need to see them, she said, voice cracking. I shook my head. Not tonight. Not like this. Her eyes flashed with a flicker of that old fire. You've taken everything, Alec. My job, my life. I cut her off. You did that. You lied. You stole. You chose Miles. Don't put that on me. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her shoulders dropped. Tears spilled silently as she turned and walked away, her car peeling out down the street. I watched her go and felt nothing. No pity. No regret. She'd made this bed. The next few days passed quietly, steadily. I returned to work, met with clients, started rebuilding our routines. The kids adjusted. Caleb opened up more. Arya clung to me a little less. People talked, of course, neighbors, friends, whispering about the scandal. I kept it simple. We're moving on, I'd say, and that was enough to end it. The hospital sent over the formal invite for the ethics committee. I accepted. Meetings were scheduled for next month. It felt right using my experience to help keep it from happening again. I thought of Preston, his tired eyes across that diner table, and made a note to thank him. He'd given me the key to all of this. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, the stars crisp above. I thought about the last 13 years, about Ivy, the life we built, the lies she wove through it. But I wasn't that Alec anymore. Not her husband. Not her shadow. I was free, not just from her, but from the version of myself I'd let her shape. Caleb and Arya were mine, blood or not. And this house, this life, it was ours now. I took a sip, let the quiet wrap around me, and smiled just a little. The story wasn't over. It was just mine now, and I'd write it one day at a time. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.